I'm David Fedor, and on today's episode of Bee Gees and Me.
This was probably the biggest show I've seen in terms of arena size, but we sat so close that it didn't feel that way to us. So we had this intimate experience in a very large venue. I thought that was pretty interesting.
I can only imagine that you were like, oh my God, he's not going to jump up on stage, is he? He's not going to climb up there, is he? Like,
I don't remember that specifically, but I guess I'm glad we didn't get jumped. I think it was cool to see him and see any kind of rock star in real life. And I don't remember that you did anything too crazy. We hooped and hollered a little bit. I don't remember you throwing anything at him like underwear or whatnot.
Welcome to Bee Gees and Me. I'm David Fedor. On today's episode, I talk with my good friend Doug Sell. I've known Doug since the late 1990s when we met in college, and we've remained friends ever since. He was a groomsman at my wedding. He's a great dude. And, important to this podcast, back in 2014, he went with me to see Barry Gibb at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. So this was Barry's Mythology tour, his first solo tour. He'd never toured without his brothers before, so it was a big deal, not only for his performance, but also for him personally. He had family with him on stage, though. His son, Stephen, and his niece, Maurice's daughter, Samantha, they were there. That had to be a huge comfort for him. And this whole evening was wonderful. It paid tribute to the career of Barry and his brothers, and quite frankly, it was emotional. Of course, it was a big deal for me as well, because I had never seen the Bee Gees perform. It's one of my biggest regrets, not making an effort to see them when I had the chance. Of course, I didn't know I had the chance, or I didn't know that I wouldn't have many more chances, so I forgive myself because I was young, and there was no way to know that I would have such a limited time to see them. So I'm working on the invention of time travel to correct this, but that's a topic for a different podcast episode. I would not make the same mistake of missing out this time around, however. I had to be there. I was going to be there, and I was going to get good seats no matter the cost. Living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the closest show to me was across the state in Philadelphia, and my good friend Doug lived there, so it all worked out the way it was supposed to, and we had ourselves a real fun time. Now, a few things about the show. I made a conscious effort to not be distracted on my phone the whole time. I didn't want to be a distraction to other people around me either. Like, would my grainy cell phone photos be that important? But now, 7 years later, I'm frustrated with myself because my memory is fading, and I wish I took 1,000 photos. And why the hell didn't I turn around and take a selfie of myself with Barry in the background? Why didn't I do that? I was that close. I was in the third row. You'll hear more about that in our conversation. But that is something that's haunting me to this day that I didn't do. But I was just now, for this podcast, looking up and looking through the photos that I did take. I took about 200, actually. So wrap your mind around that. Me being conservative with my picture taking meant I only took 200 photos of that evening. But anyway, I found a couple of those pics that had my finger accidentally in the corner. So I don't have a selfie with Barry or a picture with Barry, but I do have a blurry finger in a grainy photograph from that concert that night. I'll be posting some of those photos and some of the videos from that day onto my social media pages over the course of this week. And of course, on the anniversary of the show on the 19th, that's when I'm going to post one specific video of a story that we talk about coming up. I don't want to tell you too much more here. So listen to the story, and I'm excited to share share this fun little video. One other thing, though, one of the things that I realized since we recorded this when Doug and I spoke, I realized that the anniversary of Robin's death was May 20th, and this show that we saw was on May 19th. So in 2014, that was the day before the 2-year anniversary of his passing, which I'm sure Barry mentioned that night. And I remember the emotions being very strong in the arena, and I distinctly remember crying during the Robin tribute on the show. That wasn't the only time I cried. I cried a few times, but we don't need to talk about that either. But it took me a little bit to remember the timing of the show, which I didn't reference during my conversation with Doug. So I wanted to point that out here at the top of the show, the significance of the date here. So, listener, get ready for two old friends chatting it up about the Bee Gees. All right, we're rolling. Doug, welcome.
Thanks, Dave. Glad to be on your show.
Yeah, welcome to Bee Gees and Me. Let's make this really official. Douglas Sell, I hear you have a wonderful story of a time that you went to go see Barry Gibb.
Something like that. I think I was your plus one, sort of, right?
Yeah, as listeners of my podcast know, I'm a huge Bee Gees fan. That's pretty much what you need to know. I've never seen the Bee Gees live, and in 2014, when Barry Gibb toured with the Mythology tour, and he had his son there, he had his niece there, he had his band, and he played Bee Gees hits. I had to go, no matter what. It was I've missed every other opportunity to see the Bee Gees perform live. I wasn't going to miss Barry Gibb, which could have been his last tour. And it came through Philadelphia, which was the closest to me. And you lived in Philadelphia at the time. I said, hey, Doug, guess what we're doing Monday night? We're going to a Barry Gibb concert.
Right. So it wasn't Monday, so the very unrock and roll kind of night, I guess. So I remember being out at the bar a little bit later than probably should have been on a school night.
Yeah, anybody could have a huge rock and roll concert on a Friday or a Saturday, but it takes a real rock and roller to party hard on a Monday night.
Yeah, but I remember that because maybe you can tell this part of the story, but Dave bought these, I don't know what they were called, like VIP tickets, right? Is that what it was? A VIP experience where we got to go in one of the suites at the Wells Fargo Center and have, hors d'oeuvres and drinks and hobnob with other really passionate Bee Gees fans. So that was dinner, I think, for the night. We just ate the free food in the in the VIP suite, and that was probably my first time doing that, where you kind of get the sort of velvet red rope treatment, right?
Red carpet.
VIP, you're sitting like 6th row, red carpet, 6th row, like, so, obviously seeing the Bee Gees for the first time.
Whoa. I did not spring all that money for us to sit in the 6th row, sir. We were in the 3rd row.
3rd row. Thank you for clarifying that. It was very close, for sure. But yeah, that was my first impression. Was Dave is not sparing any expense for these tickets, and then I actually saw the ticket, and I just could not believe the number on that ticket. I was like, "This is a misprint."
Too many zeros at the end of that number.
But I think that I was very shocked.
The Night Fever package or the Staying Alive package. I didn't necessarily need the VIP experience or the hors d'oeuvres before or the cake or whatever they had. If people are people who put it together are sitting here listening to this, you did an awesome job. It was fantastic. But my 2 free comp drinks weren't worth the amount of money that we paid. My guarantee, the only thing I wanted to make sure was that we were 3rd row, close enough to the stage where Barry could hear me yell. And that was again, like you said, it was one of these things that has always eluded to me, and I wasn't going to miss out on experiencing Barry Gibb live. And yeah, it still to this day might be the only time I ever get to. So if I had to, plop down an exorbitant amount of money, then
It was worth it
then
because it's still
yeah,
something you
it
talk
was worth
about
it.
now. So the memory, it was worth that investment because it's still a huge moment.
Yeah, little did I know that 7 years in the future I would have a podcast episode about it. See, that's worth a couple $100 right there alone.
So,
So
Dave, quick question, Dave. Yeah, well, the VIP experience that to get into the third row, you had to buy that package. Just for clarification, like you couldn't just buy the seats. Is that correct?
right, yes. So here's the thing that pisses me off about that. When we get there and we're sitting there, um, this lady comes in and sits in front of us. I don't know if you remember, but she was like looking all around and she was all ridiculously happy. And she said something about like she got moved up, she got bumped up, like her tickets were in the back, but they moved her up into the to fill up the second row because there weren't enough idiots like me who was going to pay that much money to sit that close. And I was like, son of a bitch, I could have been that person who got moved up. This lady probably spent $40 for her tickets and she's gotten second row seats. That's bull. But yeah, that was a fun time. But before we get too much into that night, though, I want to give some of our listeners a little background about you and I, our friendship. We've known each other since the early 2000s. Went to college together, and I wanted to ask you. Back then, was my Bee Gees addiction in full bloom? Were you aware of how ridiculously addicted to the Bee Gees I was? Actually, no, it was the 90s. It was the late 90s. It
Yeah,
would
I
have
was
been
about to. I was gonna.
99.
Yeah, I was gonna say 98 or 99. Um, I would.
Yeah.
So I would say yes. It was part of your personality. I think I knew you were a Bee Gees fan. It was sort of like, especially then they were probably still not, I don't know, well respected. It was kind of a joke band to be in like the popular, kind of mainstream
Yeah.
where they only knew a couple songs. So it was sort of like, Dave's an eccentric guy. Of course, his favorite band is somebody like the Bee Gees. So yeah, I think I feel like it was well known. That was sort of like your shtick. You talked about them a lot. Um, so yes, I would say it was pretty evident. I mean, it's not like those were the only T-shirts you wore or anything like that, where it was so over the top. Or I don't remember how your rooms were decorated necessarily, but but yes, I always feel like if I think of the beat,
I didn't have my Bee Gees face tattoo.
right? You didn't have that yet. You have that now, just for people at home not to know
Right, right.
But yes, I would say it's. And I remember, I don't know when you first told me the story of how you got into the Bee Gees, but I kind of remember that you're in your car. You were certain. I don't know how old you were, but is that correct? Where you heard them on the radio, or you somehow heard them in a car, and I got to figure out who this band is. That kind of moment, if I recall. So
No, yeah, that's exactly what it was, and I tell it often, and um, yeah, it was definitely one of my go-to stories as we all sat around and drank back in the day. So I'm sure you heard it a couple times, probably, because that was always one of the things that people always asked was, "What? Bee Gees? Why do you love the Bee Gees?" or something like that. So I always had to
right,
defend myself and say I was struck by lightning, and that lightning electricity was the Brothers Gibb, and it changed my DNA, and that's why. So, but yeah, all I can remember back then, and this bleeds into why I have this podcast now, is because I, like you said, was the only one who I've ever known that was a Bee Gees fan. It was just the Bee Gees and me, and it was this lonely island that I was living on by myself that I tried dragging people to. And if that meant spending hundreds of dollars to force my friend to go with me to a Bee Gees concert in Philadelphia, that's what I had to do.
right. Well, and I understand that passion, and I think it's a cool thing to be so into one band like that. Um, I think that's great, and I'm glad that I was the person that got to go with you to that show. I'm sort of surprised that I guess Barry Gibb just doesn't tour enough for you to have a second chance, or if there's any other future shows. But
Well, I think as he's getting a little bit older and his brothers passed away, that really had an effect on his passion for performing. And part of the reason that he did the Mythology tour was because his family demanded that he go out and tour and do work and play music, because he was moping around and feeling really, bad about losing his brothers and
oh
things like
wow,
that.
okay,
Um, so yeah, and yeah, like he had a lot of survivor's guilt and a lot of, all that stuff about grieving and losing his brothers and his bandmates and his family, basically. Yeah. um so I know that with this latest album, he just did a country album and redid a bunch of covers of classic PG songs in a country style, and it's performing really well. And I think he wants to tour with that, or at least perform with that live in Nashville a couple times, or maybe even just once. I don't know, but yeah, if he does that, I'm going to be going to Nashville. You want to go with me?
I would love to go to Nashville, and I'll go to see that show too.
Nice. All right. So now, granted, I had at the time a fiance. I was engaged to be married, and because it was a weekday and she couldn't get her work schedule and she was in the dental hygiene school at the time. She couldn't get her schedule to work for it. Um, so it's not like I was begging or bribing. I had to pay somebody to go with me to this concert. I had plenty of options.
Oh yeah, I agree. Right, but I also offered you a free room and board.
Yes. Yeah, so I didn't have to pay for a hotel, so that helps as well. So I drove out. So it was a Monday show. So the reason I'm doing this podcast now is, coming up on May 19th. This show will be the week before, but on May 19th it'll be 7 years since I saw Barry Gibb with you, Doug, in Philadelphia. And it was a Monday night show for some reason. I guess that's just how the tour went. And I think they play hockey at Wells Fargo Center, maybe.
Yes.
And he was going around to different cities as well. So I'm sure of the dates, because there were other dates, and people go to concerts on Monday, so it wasn't that strange. But I drove out that morning, and from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, it's about a 5-hour drive. I stopped and got a cheesesteak and walked around Philadelphia a little bit. Do you live in South Philly at the time?
Right. So it was South Philly Italian Market area for anyone who's listening. So pretty close to the stadium area where we went.
Yeah. I remember I bought a cheesesteak. I forget whether I got Geno's or Pat's. I think I got Geno's. And ate a cheesesteak. So that's why I wasn't too concerned about the food at the VIP at the VIP area. But I also knew that I didn't want to drink a ton, because I didn't want to like be too altered of a state to enjoy this moment, this bucket list moment. So but yeah, we met up because you worked a full day of work. I sat in a car all day, and then we
Right.
went right to the thing. So it wasn't like it was too much of a party. I was kind of tired, if I'm honest, or
Right.
anything. But yeah, going to Philadelphia and then going into this VIP area, we didn't go into the main doors. We had our own separate entrance. And then we had to walk through the hallways and in the bowels of the Wells Fargo Center, and went to this room where they had all this stuff set up. They had a dance floor. They had a DJ there spinning music, classic disco music, not just Bee Gees. And they had some food and a big sheet cake. But I remember that, it wasn't as VIP as I thought it would be. It was really chill.
And he never, like, he didn't come out and sign autographs, or he didn't make an appearance.
No, yeah. So
I would remember that. So I'm pretty sure he did not.
No, I also would have remembered that, and maybe that's what the Night Fever package was, versus the Staying Alive package. Maybe the first 2 rows. I later found out in later years that there was a, sound check, and there were some people that were present for the sound check, and I remember going and, like, going through a couple doors and trying to find my way into there to see if I could stumble upon him just randomly sitting on the stage, tuning his guitar or something like that. And I found my way into the empty arena, and I took a couple pictures and then was escorted back by a security guard who was like, "You can't be in here."
Right.
But do you remember any of that? Do you remember any of me trying to ninja like sneak my way into meeting Barry Gibb?
I mean, I guess yeah, a little bit. I don't. I remember being in the room, like in the arena when it was empty. So either we got to our seats really early, or we hung around late. I feel like we got to our seats really early, right? Where like guys are still on stage putting down bottled water
Uh-huh.
and towels, and we got in there as early as we could after your
Yeah.
little like, you know, trespassing episode.
Yeah, because yeah, they definitely let us in first, and we all walked up, and there was an opening band. I forget who they were. One of I remember that, like, they were this cool hipster band where there was like an upright bass, and the guy was like playing this upright bass, and
Yeah,
I took a picture because my good friend Milton. If Milton, if you're listening, man, I swear that was you playing that upright bass. You know Milton. You remember Milton? He went to IEP with us.
I do. Yeah,
But it was like one of those cool hipster bands that you probably listen to.
yeah. I don't remember. I have no idea what they were called, but I had I'm trying to remember, Dave. When we're at the VIP, we talked to people, right? I mean, we were kind of standing at cocktail tables, and we were the youngest people there by far. I recall that, but
Yeah,
these were other big BG fans. So you finally had some BG fans to talk to.
yeah, and it was kind of an intimidating experience because I wasn't sure who was there, and I was nervous. So I didn't take advantage of making connections as well as I should have then probably. Like, I don't remember anybody's name that we talked to or hung out with. Not that we even hung out. Like you said, we were the youngest people there. Not only like the people who could have afforded the package that we
Right,
got, and who are Bee Gees fans. This isn't some kind of shitty bar in downtown
right.
Philly. Um, so yeah, it was definitely and then here's the other thing too. So you said we're the youngest people there. I was also the tallest person there by far, and that's always something that I'm conscious of when I go to concerts is people having to sit behind me. So all I could think of is, a bunch of ladies who weren't very tall in stature at all, having to sit behind the 6'4" dude whose big, broad, muscular shoulders are blocking their view. And so I started feeling very self-conscious about that as well as I was looking around and seeing the people that we were there with.
And it was a seated show, so you didn't know like when do you stand up? Are you allowed to stand up? If the people behind you aren't standing, you got to sit down. Like,
Yeah,
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 yeah. I've mastered. I went to a They Might Be Giants concert once. I think I've told you this story before. My friend Scott and I drove to Washington D.C. on a whim. It was like middle of December. It was like, hey, let's go. Yeah, all right. And we drove overnight to get there, to buy tickets, to stand in line because it was general admission. We rushed to the stage and we were like in the in the second row of people standing, and they performed, and there was this weird, like, there's like a gate up and like a barrier, and then there was this like little platform that was an extra inch or two off the ground, and then the rest of the general mission. So we were standing up on this little elevated riser. So it was me and him. He's not too much shorter than I am, standing in the middle of the arena on with an extra 2 inches on our feet, watching this show. And at the end of the show, They Might Be Giants like said, "Oh, put the lights up. Yeah, we want to thank everybody for coming." And and then they pointed directly, we thought, at us and said, "And we especially want to thank those girls right there who had to stand behind these two tall assholes the whole night. Thanks for coming to the show, girls." And we're like, "Oh no." And like we were just devastated because we love this band so much. We got to see them. We drove 6 hours to go see them, and they yelled at us on stage. Um, so ever since then at concerts, I'm definitely hyper aware. And I have that concert, like They Might Be Giants, that tour that they did, I forget, I think it was like 2003, maybe 2004. They released all those concerts on their website where you could download them.
Right.
So I have that on DVD or on CD somewhere where they're yelling at us from the stage. So I'm like, I gotta burn that and like put that on here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Something else that I've discovered since then was fan video from this Barry Gibb concert, and found some people who were on the floor a few rows behind us who filmed a bunch of songs. Like they bootlegged half half the concert and put it on YouTube, and you could clearly see, especially my head and your head occasionally being like next to me, but like if I'm sitting in there with my hands above my head clapping, you could definitely see in these videos me right there in the middle like a doofus,
Nice.
blocking everybody's view.
Well, what can you do? You can't control your height.
Yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it.
So
Barry Gibb they have this big they have this video, they have this countdown, and then Barry Gibb comes out. Do you remember when he came out on stage? What was your reaction to that, or what was your reaction to my reaction to that? I didn't embarrass you, did I?
No, I mean, I think it was cool to see him and see any kind of rock star in real life. And I don't remember that you did anything too crazy. You hooped and hollered a little bit. I don't remember you throwing anything at him like underwear or whatnot. So I thought it was fine. Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, he was dressed kind of like a dad, right? Wasn't he dressed like a dad?
I mean,
like kind of a sweater.
Yeah, he just had a regular like pullover sweater on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't too rock star-ish. Like in other shows he had like a button down on, but this one was just a relaxed, chill look, a little bit of a V-neck. That was cool back then. The one thing that I remember doing, and I found video of this, and I'm going to post video online as well, so look for that on my social media pages at BGs and Me. So the one thing that I wanted to happen was Barry to see me. Like I knew we weren't going to be able to hug. I knew we weren't be able to like shake hands. I probably wasn't going to be able to get his autograph or anything like that. But at least if I could see him, or if I could, have him see me, that would be super cool. So as he came out, I put my hands over my head and I did a bowing motion, like a worship type bowing motion. And Barry saw that and pointed at me and gave me like a nod back. And I was like, all right, that's it. I could sit here and enjoy the show and not have to freak out or anything like that, because I bowed to Barry and he nodded back. And, that was pretty much the epitome of what could happen.
I did not remember that specific detail. It's funny, but now that you say that, I do remember that happening. Like, where he did acknowledge you, or like he looked down in the front rows and saw us. So your memory is far superior than mine.
Well, you have to understand, Doug, this was a big deal for me. Yeah, other than that, like the actual show itself was fine. It was interesting to hear him sing the songs. There was obviously an absence of Maurice and Robin, his brothers there. The three of them together, that magic is what made the Bee Gees special. But it was still great seeing him. He had his son Stephen with him, and then Maurice's daughter Samantha. And I know that you thought it was really cool that he had his family there.
Yeah, it just felt kind of like, I don't know, I gave it like a sweetness, and it seemed like they were really enjoying kind of having a family concert tour, right? And it was more stripped down, right? If I remember, I mean, the songs were sort of uh, danceable when they were dance type songs, but I feel like generally it was kind of like this stripped down version of I don't know, of most of the Bee Gees songs. I don't know if that's 100% right, but I kind of have that memory that it was a little more mellow.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was the energy and the youthful excitement wasn't there. It wasn't one of those, crooner sings his greatest hits. I'm gonna phone it in type shows, but it was closer to that a little bit. So the evening wasn't a crazy disco fest where everybody's snorting cocaine and sweating out all their booze on the dance floor. It was a Monday. It was a Monday night sit down at the Wells Fargo Center. I know that being in the third row kind of warped my perspective of the evening because we were so close. It felt a little intimate. But I remember at one point turning around and looking and realizing that this was an arena show, that this was, there were people in section 305, a half a mile away, which was still impressive for a performer at his stage of his career.
Yeah, the two things I thought about were I don't really go to stadium shows, so this was probably the biggest show I've seen in terms of arena size. But we sat so close that it didn't feel that way to us. And also, this wasn't just for everybody. It wasn't an elaborate stage setup, right? It was a pretty just standard rock and roll stage. It didn't have you think of U2 or where they have flying aerials and like stages that go out into the crowd. This didn't have any of that. It was a fairly basic stage. So we had this intimate experience in a very large venue. Yeah, you're right. When you looked around and the lights were on, you realized how big it was. But it didn't feel that way to me. So it's I thought that was pretty interesting.
One of the things that was special about that show, and I talked about on another podcast episode, is that he sang a Bruce Springsteen song. Do you remember anything about that?
Which song was it? Streets of Philadelphia, I assume.
No, actually,
Or not?
it was Into the Fire. No, I'm sorry. It was I'm on Fire. And I think it fit Barry's voice a little bit better, and that's why he picked that song. But earlier, like a month or two before then, Bruce sang Staying Alive with the E Street Band at one of his concerts. So Barry was so touched that because he was in Philadelphia, which is close to Jersey and close to streets of Philadelphia with Bruce Springsteen and everything, he sang it there at the Philadelphia show to kind of say thank you back to Bruce Springsteen.
Interesting. I mean, I don't remember that specifically, but I remember all of like the duets he did with his niece, and just a lot of just a great romantic ballads, and a lot of the songs that I didn't really realize he wrote or his brother wrote, or some mixture of the two that were made hits by other people. So I thought that was part of it I really liked a lot. Like I'm gonna mess up the one song, but is it like Islands in the Sand or Islands in the Dream
Islands
or
in the
something?
Stream.
Yeah, I had some natural, streams,
so close.
sand,
Yeah.
but like those I really liked a lot. The ballads I really enjoyed. I mean, that's kind of the stuff I like anyway. But just hearing it was like spanning their whole catalog, but a lot of those songs that they wrote that they didn't popularize themselves.
Yeah. That's one of the things in the 80s they had to do because the radio wasn't playing the Bee Gees because the Bee Gees weren't cool because they were a disco band. So they became songwriters and had all these hits with, a dozen other artists. And then they reemerged like a phoenix from the flame and dominated again and got their respect back, like you say. Now, I remember you liking I Started a Joke and a lot of their older 60s material because there was a time when the like playing music on vinyl was cool, and you used to go to these parties in Philly, and it was like bring your own vinyls and you get to play music type thing or something, or like tell me something about that, because I remember you really liking the Best of the Bee Gees, that yellow vinyl.
Yeah, so that is still the only Bee Gees record I have. But yeah, so yeah, it was like, yeah, it's a best of, but it's like it's their first best of, right? They're sort of pre-disco best of, and I played that song a lot. So I actually DJ'd for a few months, like Sunday brunch at a local bar, and I would play I Started a Joke a lot at the brunch DJing session on vinyl, so all vinyl. Um, so it was, that was probably my favorite song by them. But I think I was introduced to that song because Faith No More, a '90s band, covered that song.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's when I first heard it, and then went, what? That's a Bee Gees song, and then, it's just a great song.
That's one of those Robin songs where he gets real emotional and old school. Like, it's so passionate and so just like you could feel how raw that is. And once they made the transition from that early raw sound into a more produced disco sound, a lot of that stuff went away. So I could totally understand why people gravitate to some of those early records, because they're so fun and so raw.
Yeah, exactly. And do you know, Dave, if did he play that song at the show, or would that be something he wouldn't do because it was one of his brother's, maybe more personal songs, I guess?
I want to say they played a live video, or they played a video of Robin singing it to a montage of um like Robin clips to honor him, because Robin just passed away like maybe a year and a half to 2 years before that. He died in 2012. So this would have been the first time Barry performed anywhere before that.
I do remember that now, or at least some sort of video montage. At least it was better than a hologram, which could be a little weird. But like there was a screen behind. There was a screen behind him.
Yeah. There was a big screen with video and live feed of the actual concert as it was going on, and then above us, which we couldn't even see because we were sitting so close because we had awesome seats. Were even more screens for everybody else in the audience. Now, as part of these awesome seats and as part of this package that we got swag. This is swag that the rest of the whole audience didn't get. Just me and you and a few of the other people that were down there in the first couple rows. Do you remember this?
I still have not really, besides my laminated badge. I have that still.
Well, I have your hat.
Oh, he stole it. Okay.
So they didn't give us any of this stuff. Well, they didn't give us any of this stuff at the show. They mailed it all like a month and a half later. I still have and the people at home can't see me holding this up to the camera, Barry Gibb Mythology tour, cool hat. And you got this cool Mythology tour tote bag. See, this almost feels like a PBS for monthly installments of $24.99. You can get this tote bag.
Yeah, this is very unrock and roll giveaway items.
But this is well, this is a very cool. This is canvas. This is cool. Like, you throw this over your shoulder while you're riding your bike on the bike lanes downtown, going to the Whole Foods, and you could put your organic produce in here. That's it's cool hipster rock and roll. But I don't know if I've had these kind of in storage, but on the back of this it says Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, Concord, Los Angeles, Wantagh. Is that? So I hadn't seen that side of it. I was afraid to open these.
So it's a very small tour.
Oh yeah, he didn't go all over. I think he did one leg over in like Europe, and did a bunch of shows there, and then here in the States, he only did those 6 shows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, he only did these 6 shows. I almost considered, or I did consider, I almost did it, buying tickets to every show and going on a road trip and trying to go to every single one of them. But it would have been ridiculously time consuming and um, definitely not. I wish I would have gone to the Hollywood Bowl one because that seems like a fun show, or the Concord one, or whatever that's out there in the Hollywood Bowl, Los Angeles, California, I guess. Um, that one seemed like it was fun. But then there, you also, Doug, have at my house Bee Gees Mythology Tour program.
Wow.
So these are going for a decent amount on eBay. So you should be lucky, or you should be glad that I held on to this for you for
Thank
7
you,
years.
Dave. Can I come by and get it tomorrow?
You're welcome. You're welcome. Oh, here, one other thing I need to get. Oh, shoot. All right, now one of my biggest memories of the evening was at the end of the show. So Barry said goodnight, waved to everybody on stage, and left, right? And I had hoped that maybe I could kind of bum rush the stage and try to shake his hand or something, or just do it. But that was obviously not going to happen. I could tell. But I still hopped the chairs to get close to the stage to try to find like a pick, or try to find something that was there. And I remember the roadies came out and start taking the guitars away. And I was like, hey, any picks, any picks? And I like start yelling and trying to talk to the roadies like, hey man, can you help me out? Whatever. And the guy was like, no, we ain't got nothing, man. Just go home. Just go home. There's nothing here. Go home. And then he like bends over and he starts picking something up off the ground. And I was like, what's that? Can I have that? What's that? And it was this, the playlist from the evening that was at the feet of the man himself, Barry Gibb, that had the list of songs that he performed. Here's I'm on Fire right here, the Bruce Springsteen song. And actually you could see here,
Yeah.
where was it?
I
Here it
see.
is here.
Yeah, I
I
see
started
it.
a joke. So they did do that. I started a joke for Robin. But do you remember? Because I remember kind of turning around and looking at you, watching me beg for stuff off the stage, and being like, "Oh my God, this guy's gonna embarrass me." Do you remember? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I do remember that because I remember just kind of standing back and hoping you didn't get in trouble. I didn't remember that you got the actual set list until I see it now, but that's awesome. But yeah, I let you indulge in whatever behavior you wanted to do as long as you didn't get beat up.
Yeah. Like I could only imagine that you were like, "Oh my God, he's not gonna jump up on stage, is he? He's not gonna climb up there, is he?" Like the level
No.
the level of fandom that I have, who knew at that point? Because I think probably I was dead set on getting something, and I knew that I needed some sort of uh, memento. And I remember getting that, and I remember people around me being like, "Oh, what? Ah!" And I rolled it up in a little tube and put it underneath my shirt as we walked out of the arena, because I didn't want the hassle of other people. Not that I thought that a bunch of Bee Gees fans would jump me for a set list, but I didn't want a bunch of Bee Gees fans jumping me for a set list.
That's a good topic for one of your shows. Is what are the top 5 things you could get from a concert, right? Like guitar pick, drumstick, set list. Though a set list is up there, even if it's a piece of paper in Arial font, it's still a cool get.
Yeah, that was one of a kind. That was, Gibb eyes looked upon that.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember getting out of the arena And I think I bought a bootleg T-shirt from a T-shirt vendor outside the arena for $5. And then I remember getting on either the bus or the subway to go back to your apartment and taking the set list out and opening it up, thinking, "Oh, I'm safe. I could look at this now." And having all the eyes of the subway car turn and look at us and be like, "Oh, hey, what do you got there?"
I don't remember that specifically, but I guess I'm glad we didn't get jumped.
Yeah, that was when I was worried because we were in a confined space and it was clear that I, had this and I rolled it back up and put it back under my shirt and was like, "All right, I gotta stay safe and be smart. Don't flash this around." um so all in all, we had a death-defying trip home. We had a fun, enjoyable concert, the VIP treatment. Any other memories or any concluding thoughts that you'd like to say about the Bee Gees mythology, the Barry Gibb mythology experience?
No, just I thought it was I really enjoyed the show, like not just from a enjoying it through Dave's eyes or being happy I was there for you. It was a good show. Like it was enjoyable. Sometimes you go to a show and you're ready for it to be over by a certain point. I really just loved the music. I thought it was awesome, and I was just glad that I could be there and experience it with you. And I would see him again. I mean, I guess it's sort of sad that he's not playing. He would sell out shows. He could play, that sort of stripped down vibe and be very successful, I think. So hopefully he tours that country record. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I was legit serious. I am going to Nashville when that happens. I will get tickets and go. And if you want to come along with me, I would be honored to have you as my plus one again.
Well, thank you, Dave. I feel like now I have to go to any Gibbs show you do.
A precedence has been set.
Yeah, exactly. It's been set.
Hey man, I really appreciate having you on here as well to celebrate the anniversary of our trip and reminisce and think about the fun time we had.
Thanks, Dave, for having me on your podcast to talk about the Barry Gibb show in Philly. And another thing, this is just making me think about other concert experiences. It's nice to revisit something like this. So, thank you for giving me that opportunity to think about it. Really enjoyed being here.
That has been this episode of Bee Gees and Me. I want to thank my guest and dear friend, Doug Sell, for joining me on this trip down memory lane. I hope you enjoyed it, listener. Please send me a message if you did. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have fun stories from concerts or trips to meet the Bee Gees, then I want to talk with you about them. Send me an email at beegeesandme@gmail.com with the subject header My Bee Gees Story, and tell me a little bit about your story. If you'd like to chat on the show, we could jump on a Zoom call, we could record it and put it here on the podcast. Or if you would just want me to share your story, I could read your email, whatever you're comfortable with doing. Long story short, I want this to be a place for us to be able to share our stories about our experiences and our love of the Bee Gees. During our conversation that you just listened to, Doug and I talk about a moment where Barry acknowledges me from the stage. Now, I've found video of this, and I have it, and I'm going to post it and share it on the 19th. So be sure to follow my social media accounts so you can see this, one of the highlights of my life, at Bee Gees and Me on Twitter and Instagram, and Bee Gees and Me on Facebook. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel for great videos. You can find all of these accounts and links and more at beegeesandme.com. And please be sure to subscribe here where you listen to this podcast and rate it 5 stars. It helps so much. Thank you for listening to this episode. My name is David Fedor, and this has been Bee Gees and Me.
and many more.
Any last Bee Gees parting thoughts before I stop the recording?
No, I think I'm good.